Today, we're diving into a really provocative argument. It's the idea that India has a moral duty to intervene in Bangladesh, even with military force, to protect the Hindu minority. Now, this challenges pretty much everything we think we know about sovereignty, history, and national responsibility. So, let's get right into it. So, right off the bat, here's the core question from the author Ryan Badia, and it really frames our entire discussion. It's such a direct challenge, right? It sets the stakes incredibly high by suggesting that a moral obligation could actually justify military force.
All right, so to really get a handle on this call for intervention, we first have to understand the problem as the author sees it. Their whole argument is rooted in a very specific view of history and what's happening today. For the author, it all goes back to the 1947 partition of India. They don't see it as some settled event in the history books. To them, it's the real origin of the current crisis, what they call a historical wrong that left a huge, vulnerable population on the wrong side of a brand new border.
And this is a number that really drives the author's point home. They point to this dramatic demographic shift, claiming that the Hindu population in that region has just plummeted from nearly 30% back in 1947 to less than 10% today. That number is absolutely central to their argument about how severe this issue is. And according to the author, this population drop is no accident. They cite a long, painful history of persecution, forced conversions, and violence. The source also points to more recent attacks and instability to really build a case for why action is needed, and needed now. Okay, so once the problem is laid out, the author then starts to build the actual case for intervention. And it's not just an emotional plea, it's a structured argument that's built on three main pillars. So let's break these down. First, there's this idea of historical responsibility, basically to fix the wrong of partition. Second, a moral and civilizational duty to act as a guardian of dharma, which you can think of as a sort of cosmic law and righteous duty, and to protect cultural kin. And finally, number three, a strategic imperative. This is about regional stability and, frankly, India's own security. Now, what's interesting is that the author doesn't just pull this idea out of thin air. They argue that there are actually clear historical precedents for the exact kind of humanitarian intervention they're proposing. They point to a few big international examples: NATO stepping into Kosovo, Russia's actions in Crimea, and even India's own intervention in Bangladesh back in 1971. By drawing these parallels, the author tries to normalize the idea, presenting humanitarian intervention as a tool that's already been established in international relations. This is where the argument really shifts gears, moving from the why to the how. It's not just about arguing why India should act, but laying out a pragmatic, multi-stage plan for what this intervention could actually look like. And just look at how this is structured. It's really deliberate. It starts with diplomacy, right? That frames military action as the absolute last resort. Then step 2 isn't all-out war. It's targeted operations to create safe zones. And then, crucially, step 3 is all about reconstruction, which frames the whole mission as one of protection and rebuilding, not conquest. Now, the author is clearly aware that this is a huge ask, super controversial. So a big part of the argument is getting out ahead of the criticisms and tackling the counter-arguments head-on. And this is the elephant in the room, right? The question of national sovereignty. It's pretty much the biggest obstacle to any plan like this. The author knows this and tackles it directly, posing the question themselves before offering up a rebuttal. So how do they counter that? Well, with this, the International Doctrine of Responsibility to Protect, or R2P. The whole idea here is that sovereignty isn't an absolute shield. If a country fails to protect its own people from mass atrocities, the argument goes, then the international community has a responsibility to step in. It's a controversial concept itself, but it's the main tool the author uses to justify overriding national sovereignty. But they don't just stop at sovereignty. The author also tackles a bunch of other pretty serious risks: the potential for military escalation, international backlash, and of course, deep political division at home. The position taken in the source is basically that these are calculated risks, and that strong leadership sometimes means being willing to take them for a greater moral cause. So after all of that, what's the ultimate goal? What's the end game here? Well, the author wraps things up by framing the purpose of this intervention not just in terms of immediate security, but as part of a much grander civilizational vision. At the end of the day, this whole thing is about redefining India's very role on the world stage. The author's final vision is of an India that acts decisively as a protector of its people, fulfilling what they see as its civilizational duty,
It's dharma. So the intervention isn't framed as an invasion, but as the fulfillment of a deep responsibility. And really, it all boils down to this one last, incredibly powerful quote from the source. It takes this hugely complex geopolitical issue and distills it into a simple, deeply emotional idea: a mother protecting her children. It's a compelling and definitely provocative thought to end on, leaving us all to think about the full weight of this argument.